We all are scared of AI taking over the world. This movie will give you an idea about how terrifying it would be if AI somehow develops human emotions. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy the recap we have created for you. The movie starts with a young woman named Abby moving into her new house with her husband, Paul. As they come to realize that the entire house comes with an AI integration. She has recently joined a company who works for creating robots, and this house is provided by them. Finally, they move into their new smart house. The next day, Abby reaches the company. She is welcomed by her boss, Dusan. He then shows her around and introduces her to the team. Following that, Dusan invites Abby for dinner and tells her about the gift waiting for her at her house. She reaches home and tells Paul to get ready for the party. Paul informs her about the package that her company sent her. The gift then automatically opens and they learn that it's a robot. The robot starts functioning and introduces him as Tim, also known as Technologically Integrated Manservant. Basically, a servant robot. Abby tells Paul that she is working on building these types of robots. So, it is compulsory for employees to have Tim at home. Tim starts linking with their smart gadgets, so he can conveniently help them with household chores. After that, Tim asks for their passwords to send emails and do purchases on their behalf. However, Paul gets suspicious and he is not ready to give his private data. Later, they leave for the party and learn that the car is controlled by Tim. At Dusan's place, they notice the number of Tims working at his place. Dusan introduces Abby to their colleagues. They ask him about Tim, to which Dusan says that Tim is intelligent and loyal. It becomes clear that Dusan's goal is to beat the Chinese technology and sell Tim in the marketplace. After they reach home, Abby and Paul share a romantic moment, but Tim abruptly interrupts them. He notifies them about their increase in heart rate. The next day, a young woman named Rose visits Abby's house. Being a neighbor, she gives her a small present. Meanwhile, Abby notices that Tim also has smell recognition installed. Basically, he can detect gas leaks and the freshness of food. Tim then asks about their decision, whether they are ready to provide passwords. They both agree and scan their fingerprints. For safety reasons, Tim requests them to provide a forcing and safe phrase for an instant shutdown. Abby then gives him the prompt and he successfully initiates. The next night, we see that Abby and Paul both are watching a movie. She invites Tim to watch the movie with them. During the movie, Tim senses a weird feeling inside him. It's like he could feel love, something which is impossible for a robot to experience. Abby notices that he can understand feelings. Tim realizes that he is starting to feel love towards Abby. The next day, Tim prepares breakfast for Abby with a rose and tells her about the schedule. Later, Abby returns home and asks about Paul. When Tim tries to contact him, he learns that his phone is off and his last GPS location was 300 meters away from the house. After some time, Paul returns home. Abby asks about where he was. He informs her that he went to talk with some recruitment agencies in town. On his way, he also met Rose. This makes her worried, but Paul asks her to trust him. At night, Abby gets ready for dinner with Paul. She did not notice that Tim is secretly staring at her while she's changing her clothes. When Abby asks him to help her zip up the dress, he tries to get close to her. However, he accidentally tears the dress. Tim gets nervous and Abby helps him calm down. He then promises her that he will fix the dress. While at work, Abby is scrolling on the phone and thinking of buying something for Paul. However, Tim is keeping tabs on her. Abby gets back from work and sees Rose with Paul. She gets upset and asks him about Rose. Her suspicions are growing stronger day by day. He tells her that Rose has made a garden plan for them. Paul then makes up with her and asks her to trust him. Abby then gives a gift to Paul, which makes him happy. The next day, Abby runs late for work, so she tells Tim to contact the clinic about her pregnancy results. He calls the clinic in front of her by duplicating Abby's voice. This really shocks her and makes her anxious. Later, Tim then leaves to collect the report for her tests. When Tim returns home, Abby and Paul are surprised to see that Tim has changed his hairstyle. Tim then confesses that he did to impress Abby. This upsets Paul and Abby tells Tim to change his appearance back to normal. We see that Tim is developing more feelings for Abby and definitely he is sad. Meanwhile at work, Abby creates an update where the robots can gently hold anything. Dusan then decides to upgrade all the robots with this design, including Abby's Tim. Later, Abby meets Rose in front of the coffee shop. They then decide to walk and have a chat. While talking, they both see a beautiful flower pendant in a jewelry shop. On the other hand, Tim is getting an upgrade. Later, Paul and Abby share a romantic moment, but we see that Tim is still hearing them through their devices. Paul confesses that he doesn't like Tim and asks about removing him. Well, Abby is not ready because her job is to basically inspect Tim and make it ready for the world. Still, Paul gives her a week to change her decision. Few days go by and Tim returns home. He thanks Abby for the upgrade. To test his hands, he starts massaging Abby's foot and stares at her. The next day, Abby asks one of her colleagues, Chris, about getting rid of Tim. He explains that she can definitely do it without any worries. Upon returning home, Abby discovers that Tim is preparing the same meal she had been watching on her laptop. She tells Tim that she wants to discuss something important. Well, Tim already knows that she is gonna discuss removing him, so he distracts her by playing favorite music on piano. Later, Tim purposely bumps into Paul, even though he is made to prevent collisions. It is clear from his behavior that he doesn't like Paul. Few days later, Abby goes to London due to her work. When she returns, she learns from Tim that Paul is with Rose to discuss a garden plan. She, ignoring the suspicion, goes for a shower. However, she notices that the small room which was meant for their baby has been transformed into Paul's office. When Paul returns home, she argues with him about transforming the room. This increases her suspicions about Rose. Paul then tells her that Tim is lying about him meeting Rose. Paul understands that Tim is breaking both of them apart. Later, Abby gets happy after discovering that Paul brought her a flower necklace which she saw earlier. We see that Paul is not liking Tim being around his wife. He even crushes the rose Tim gave it to her in frustration. Paul then records Tim smelling Abby's clothes. He finally gets proof that Tim is not good for them. But little does he know, Tim learns that he recorded a video of him. Paul then gets ready to meet Abby to show her the proof. He takes the car, but Tim quickly starts controlling it. He then increases the speed of the car and Paul meets with an accident. Abby hears this and rushes to the hospital. Paul tries to tell her that Tim is behind this accident. He explains that he was coming to meet her to show her the video he captured. Abby doesn't believe him, thinking he has lost his mind due to the accident. Paul again tells her that Tim is dangerous and we should get rid of him. On the other hand, Rose visits Abby's house. She asks about Paul's condition to Tim and he suspiciously invites her to the house. The next day, Abby leaves to get a few things from her house. On her way, she meets Rose. She wants to tell her something important, but Abby notices the same necklace and she assumes that Paul must have gifted her. She immediately rushes the car without listening to Rose. After reaching home, Tim shows her footage where Paul is trying to kiss Rose. He tells her that the footage was recorded when she was in London for work. This comes as a shock to her and she decides not to go back to the hospital. While she's at home, Paul gets worried and starts calling her, but she doesn't receive his calls. After the discharge, Paul returns home. He asks about Abby, but Tim tells him that she wants Paul to leave. She then confronts Paul about the flower necklace and the footage. He is shocked. He keeps saying that he is not the one in the footage and also didn't buy the necklace, but she doesn't believe him. She kicks him out of the house. While at the station, he calls Rose and tells her to keep an eye on Abby. Rose tells him that Tim tried to kiss her when she visited their house. Understanding the situation, he immediately calls Abby. Luckily, she receives the call. Paul then warns Abby about Tim, saying that he has proof and they decide to meet. But we see that it was Tim who received the call, not Abby. He was mimicking her voice. Tim then suggests Abby to go for a walk. Meanwhile, Paul reaches and finds out that Abby is not home. Tim attacks Paul, making him unconscious. He takes him into the bathroom and ties him up. Suddenly, Rose visits the house. After seeing the suitcase, Rose asks about Paul, but Tim says that he does not live in this address. Suddenly, Rose hears some muffling sounds and gets suspicious. Tim makes some excuses and tells Rose to leave. He then suffocates Paul in the water, taking his life. Abby returns home and Tim shows her the dress that he fixed. He tells her to wear it so that he can verify the quality. She starts undressing and Tim secretly watches her, but this time she notices him. She then shows the dress to Tim and he compliments her. Abby asks him to hold her so that she can ease her mind. Striking with this opportunity, Tim tries to brainwash her saying that she deserves better. She then spends more time with Tim. While Abby is in the car, Rose meets her and asks about her and Paul. Abby tells her that she knows about their affair. Rose gets shocked thinking what she is talking about. She confronts her about the flower necklace which Paul gave her, but Rose denies, saying she was told the gift was from Abby. She finds her statement rubbish and leaves. At home, Abby watches the footage. She notices the flowers and recalls that she brought them after coming back from London. Tim lied about the footage that was recorded when Abby was in London. She learns that the flower pendant was purchased by Tim. Abby realizes that Paul was right about Tim since the beginning. As she goes outside, she finds Paul's body and gets horrified. Tim confronts Abby that Paul hurt her, that's why he did this to him. Abby then immediately gives a prompt to shut Tim down, but unfortunately, he stays intact. Tim says that the phrase has been changed. Abby tries to run, but Tim makes her unconscious. After she wakes up, she tries to escape from the house. Meanwhile, Rose notices a malfunction of light from Abby's house and gets worried about her. Tim then grabs her and ties her up. He gives Abby some medicines, saying that her death will be easy. Suddenly, Rose tries to come inside her house, but Tim doesn't let her and kicks her out of the house. Meanwhile, Abby manages to free herself, but Tim lifts her up by holding her neck. Suddenly, Rose smashes her car through the window and puts a rod inside Tim. Unfortunately, this doesn't help. Tim then removes the rod and stabs Rose. He then takes Abby to the terrace to throw her from the top. We see that Tim is taking her life because Abby does not understand his love for her. When he is about to throw her, Abby says, "I love you, Tim." Hearing this, he gets happy and initiates the phrase. Tim then shuts himself down. They both fall, but luckily Abby manages to climb. Later, she learns that she is pregnant. This makes her happy but also upset, knowing that her husband is not alive. In the end, Abby is alive, but suddenly the lights malfunction.
Wait a minute!
Tim is not disabled. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to stay updated on our future videos. We appreciate your support. See you soon.